They've been gone for hundreds of years, but now they're almost back. The return of the lynx to Britain is a project which I've been following closely, because while reintroducing the lynx will be a meaningful step to repair Britain's broken ecosystems, it'll also be a statement of the UK's intent to restore nature. And like many others passionate about seeing nature continue to recover in Britain, this is a story that's close to my heart. To tell this story, I've come to the place that lynx will be reintroduced to. We're going to understand the impacts that they'll have here and how they'll silently spread throughout Britain. It's also a very wet one and these conifers don't offer much rain protection. The Eurasian lynx is one of Europe's most elusive big cats. They are largely nocturnal and lead predominantly solitary lives. I say big, but they're about the size of a Labrador and they're built completely differently. They have long legs and huge padded paws, like natural snowshoes, which let them move silently over forest floors and deep snow. They have a short stubby tail with a black tip, and their fur is thick, light brown and speckled with dark spots, giving them camouflage in the woodland light. And those golden eyes and iconic black ear tufts give them that mythical ghost of the forest look. And being a predator that relies upon stealth and ambush, catching small mammals, birds and deer, they are rarely seen. Lynx avoid humans. Their attuned senses will hear our loud voices and our clumsy footsteps, and they'll also pick up on our scent. You might not think that you smell, but to a lynx, you certainly do. And this may come as something of a surprise to you, but there has never been a recorded attack or fatality from a healthy wild lynx to a human during modern times. But what about our children? Are they at risk of being attacked by a lynx? Again, there is no evidence of this. And you know, I've got 2 toddlers myself and I can assure you the lynx will smell those 2 from a long way off. Before reintroducing an animal like the lynx, a really good question to ask is why? To explore this, I've dug into books, research papers, and spoken with people at the heart of the story. In this video, we'll hear from Lauren, a sheep farmer living along Hadrian's Wall in northern England, and Deb, the lead ecologist from the Missing Lynx project, the group that's done the most in recent years to understand and advocate for the lynx's return. They published 2 major reports, one on the ecological feasibility and more recently one on the social side. That social study was published about a month ago, and since then it's hit the news in very different ways. And that's exactly where Ground News come in, who I've partnered with for this video. Ground News is a website and an app that brings together coverage of the same story from across the spectrum, showing political leanings, credibility, factuality, and even who owns the outlet. But here's the interesting part. Almost all of the coverage on this lynx story came from outlets rated as centre and highly factual. But look at the headlines. One leads with 72% of locals support reintroduction, and another goes with sheep farmers fear attacks. These are 2 articles on the same report and they give completely different impressions. And that's the power of Ground News. It shows you how even reliable reporting can be framed differently. And one of their best features is the blind spot feed, which highlights stories covered on one side but ignored by the other. This is a great way to break out of your bubble. And because of all these features, Ground News has become my way of keeping up with the world, and it's especially useful when I'm making these videos. And right now they're offering 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes everything that I've just mentioned. Just head to ground.news/leave, or just go to the link in the description or in the comments, or you can scan the QR code that's on the screen now. Thanks to Ground News for enabling this video and keeping me informed. It's not clear exactly, but we believe the lynx went extinct in Britain around the 13th century. It is highly possible that the species could have held on for a little longer, but this would have just been an ever dwindling number of individuals until the last one laid down in some quiet place and died. Last year, I ventured up to the Bone Caves in the north of Scotland, a time capsule of Britain's lost fauna, from wolves to polar bears. These caves hold the evidence that Britain was once a much wilder place. Some bones were washed in as nearby glaciers retreated, but some are likely here because animals took shelter. It's these caves which represented an entirely lost guild of wildlife, and like any other influential or wild charismatic animal, the lynx became extinct at the hands of humans. There was a time when humans and lynx shared the landscape as fellow hunters and gatherers, but even then, lynx were exploited as a resource. Archaeologists have found lynx bones marked with butchery cuts, showing that both their fur and meat were used. And whether if it were the Romans who claimed that lynx urine cured stomach problems, or early Slavic and Baltic people setting their claws and teeth into jewellery as hunting charms, humans have long taken from the lynx. And with the rise of pastoral agriculture, humans raising livestock, lynx became an unwanted nuisance, hunted under bounties. This direct persecution was compounded by the tightening grip people had on the landscape, clearing, grazing and degrading the very habitats lynx once called home, until their populations would have been squeezed out into extinction. So perhaps on a moral level, we should feel like we should bring this species back. Given the hyper-keystone species that we are living on this island, should we not reinstate them? Should we not begin to rebuild this island, which we've altered so much? You know, I think it's David Attenborough which once said, whether if we like it or not, we are the species on Earth that decide what happens. So I travelled to see a very wet Kilda forest, which has been identified as one of the core reintroduction sites as part of the ecological feasibility work undertaken by the Missing Lynx project.
So we did a lot of ecological modelling work. When we started down this path about 5 or 6 years ago, that was the first thing we looked at. So we wanted to go back to scratch and look at the habitat that we've got, and we looked at the whole of Britain. So for England, Wales and Scotland, what is the habitat? Is it suitable for lynx? And then we ran computer simulation models where you look at lynx moving across the landscape and increasing in number and dying, and where they would spread and where they would survive. And that's the viability of the population. So where in the country are lynx viable? Where would it work? And at the minute, and the habitat that we've currently got, so the woodland that we've currently got, just this area of northern England into southern Scotland for England is the viable area. Nowhere else at the minute is. Quite a lot of Scotland is suitable for lynx already as well, particularly in the Highlands. There's a lot of habitat up there that's suitable. So the northern England, southern Scotland area works for lynx. The Highland area also works for lynx. The bottleneck of Glasgow and Edinburgh makes a barrier between them. So in terms of bringing lynx back to Britain as a species, the best solution is actually to start a population off in northern England, start a population off in the Highlands, and eventually they would meet.
Outside of woodland cover in more human-dominated landscapes, lynx don't tend to disperse all that well, with large and busy roads and rail infrastructure forming the core barriers. But this isn't always the case. As lynx are solitary animals, they will eventually find their own territories. This causes subadults to make incredible journeys, particularly the males. In the Swiss Alps, a radio-collared lynx was tracked crossing the same open valley several times, navigating a fenced highway, a railway line, and a 30-metre wide river. Although this is an exception to how lynx usually disperse, it shows that they're highly adaptable, not limited to vast wilderness, but capable of moving silently through human-shaped landscapes too. And to me, this means that as Britain becomes more forested, even if it is non-native conifer plantations, we could see lynx quietly spread to areas which we never thought they would. And you know, Kilda might look like rows of regimented conifer plantations, but to a lynx, you know, this is good enough. It holds prey to hunt, it has cover for them to shelter and to live. If lynx can come back and successfully inhabit these landscapes, it's going to change my relationship with these plantations. Healthy, functioning ecosystems are built like pyramids. This is called the trophic pyramid. It shows how energy flows through a system. At the bottom, you've got plants, above them, the herbivores, then the mesopredators, and at the very top, the apex predators. It sounds simple, but the reality is a complex and mind-blowing web of interactions across and throughout every level. And when you deplete or remove one of these trophic levels, especially the one at the top, this has ripple effects throughout the ecosystem. And this is exactly what's happened here in Britain, where we have removed all of our large apex land predators, so not just lynx, but also wolf and bears. Without pressure from natural predators, populations of all 6 deer species have exploded across Britain. Estimates range from as high as 4 million to as low as 650,000 individuals. No one really knows the true number, but what is clear is that there are far too many deer for our already fragmented native forests to regenerate and thrive. Whether if it's red deer roaming Scotland's highlands or roe deer living throughout Britain's woodlands, our two native species have been surviving in a broken trophic system and an ever-changing landscape. The absence of natural predators isn't the only reason for today's deer boom, nor the degradation of Britain's woods, but the simple fact remains. Deer eat the leaves of trees and the saplings that would become the next generation of our forests. And in many places, we're left with isolated woods stripped bare, their ground trampled, and only a single ageing generation of trees standing. And it isn't just our natural habitats that suffer, our farmlands pay the price too.
I've got some friends who run a fruit and veg business, and they've had to, put massive fencing around their new orchard. That's hugely expensive because of the deer problem. And that's not to say that they wouldn't cause any problems if there weren't so many of them, but it wouldn't be as big a problem as it is now. They're just everywhere.
In the absence of natural predators, humans have stepped in to cull deer, but we simply haven't been effective enough on our own. And that's where beginning to return a creature like the lynx could begin to make a difference, but maybe not in the way that you expect.
If we do end up bringing lynx back to the northern England, southern Scotland area, the work that we've done in looking at how many we'd end up with, we'd probably end up with about 50 or 70 even after 100 years under the habitat that we've currently got. So if we improve the amount of woodland, then there could be more lynx, but we're talking about 50 or 70 lynx. So if one lynx eats one deer a week, that's only 50 deer a year. So 50 times 50, 2,500 deer. It's not a huge number of deer, so they're not going to be a silver bullet on the deer problem that we've got. But what they do is by being present, and not even by being next to a deer, but the deer smelling them, knowing that they're present, knowing they're in the area, the deer will move around more. And instead of focused grazing on a particular area and causing damage, it would be more spread out through the woodland. So the landscape of fear is that awareness that the prey has that there is a predator there that's completely missing at the minute.
And while humans will always have a role in managing deer, the lynx and other apex predators are the missing piece. While a lynx reintroduction will affect many groups of people, one that is likely to be most affected is the farming community. There is a risk of lynx predating livestock, and the Missing Lynx Project have been doing brilliant work to listen to and inform local farmers. This included a trip to Europe to understand how potential conflict is mitigated in Germany and Switzerland, but also throughout the process they've formed focus groups and put on workshops. This included a free, family-friendly exhibition which 10,000 people experienced. Running across 15 different venues, it gave people a chance to learn and better understand the lynx. And Lauren is one farmer who went to Europe and has been part of the working groups. She lives right on Hadrian's Wall in Northumberland.
There are less kind of realistic fears that they're going to be running about in packs, chasing around all the kind of lambing fields, and that's not realistic. Given the way that lynx behave, they're solitary animals, they never hunt in packs. I think some of those fears are unfounded, but it's based on ignorance, not malice. We don't know much about the lynx, so as a population we don't know much about the lynx. So yeah, I think there's a lot of there's a need for information, good information, but there's also definitely a need to work with farmers to develop the kind of solutions to protect livestock.
Mitigation on the continent includes compensation schemes, guardian dogs, active shepherding and better fencing. All interesting options that have been designed and used in the context of those areas.
There's different ways that the risk can be managed, that it can be reduced. What would apply in this country, what would work in this country, is really up to farmers to think about what is practical. So we're just in the process of talking to farmers about that to try and build a plan. And really that plan, if it's to work, needs to be built together. So co-developing a plan that is feasible for this situation in this country.
So, as Deb said, they are currently in the process of developing these mitigation strategies, but this isn't just for farmers. The Missing Links project has to continue to work with all of their focus groups, not to mention looking at sourcing links, setting up monitoring, and likely endless piles of paperwork. But that's what has to be done if we're going to give this reintroduction the very best chance of succeeding. From the very beginning, the Missing Links project made a bold promise. If they could prove that this was possible, if they could show that the community was behind it, and if every piece of the plan was in place, then they would ask the government for the green light. Think about that for a second. We've reached the stage where it isn't just a dream, it's a potential application on the desk of Natural England, the people who decide whether to say yes. And after speaking with Lauren and Deb, what struck me most was how close we really are. This isn't some distant fantasy, it's within touching distance. I'm convinced the Missing Links project will keep pushing this forward, and if you want to be part of the moment Britain decides to welcome the Lynx back, you can. There's a link in the description where you can support their work.
I just think it would be magical, to be honest. Yeah, I think they're just such stunning creatures. And I think to have that kind of top predator back, there isn't a threat to us. You know, there's none of the, we don't need to be fearful of them. But we can find them awesome. You know, they are so amazing.
The very best way to support Leave Curious is by becoming a member over on Patreon. That's linked on the screen here, along with a video if you want to keep watching. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Leave Curious.